Hello, folks. Welcome to tonight's webinar. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I just had to deal with the kid situation. And it's so funny because that's exactly what we're talking about tonight. It's time to cue the Billy Madison theme song because the kids are going back to school. And we know that there's an awful lot of issues that can come with that. I think that a lot of the responsibility and the onus obviously falls on us as caregivers because I'll tell you, kids, they never fail to really listen to their parents. They never fail to emulate them though. So it's like they're watching you. Don't think that they're not. And if you have positive, high quality habits, then they're going to adopt those, and they're going to have those in their life as well. So to me, it's like as caregivers, we have to set up our kids for success and make sure that they have the best case scenario day by day. And we're the ones that buy the food. And we're the ones that show them the habits and what to do and what not to do. So as September starts to roll around, we want to make sure that we're being proactive and that we really have a few things in place to make sure that we're keeping their little immune systems the way that they should be. And we can, of course, talk about the genes and different things associated with what the immune system is. And we're going to dive a little bit into that tonight and talk to some, protocols, tactics, things that you can use to make sure that they're healthy throughout the school year. So to discuss this with me is the great and powerful Dr. Laura Varden. Welcome.
Aren't you sweet? Thank you so much. I love doing these webinars with you, especially, ones that are so fundamentally important just in general health, wellness, and the cyclical times of year that we are preparing for. Back to school, temperatures changing, kids getting excited, parents going through that transition, whether they're like, yes, they're going back to school, or, oh, I'm going to miss my babies, or somewhere in between. It's always important that we care for our kids. I mean, all of us as parents want our kids to be as healthy as possible, to do the best that they can. I mean, the whole reason to go to school is to learn and to socialize. And we want to make sure that they're able to do that. And they can't do that very well if they're sick. So I'm looking forward to this, and I hope everyone else is too.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important to kind of point out that everybody has an immune system, right? And I think that it's just that when you're a kid, so there's two different kind of, aspects to the immune system. There's the innate immune system, right, which is just that like first line of defense. That's really to just deal with those acute stressors, those pathogens and things that might attack you. The innate immune system is pretty good and is going to take care of a lot of that, but then there's another thing called the adaptive immune system, or like some people call it the acquired immune system. And that's something that isn't particularly strong in young people just because they haven't been around long enough to be exposed to the different types of things that adults have been. So we want to make sure that we're strengthening their immune systems to the best of our ability. And there's so many different little pathways you can take advantage of. I mean, be it detoxification and hydration, be it micronutrients and making sure that you're shoring that up so that they're not going to school with already existing deficiencies. So for us, I mean, I think it's really just piecing together a little toolkit for parents and the kids alike so that we can make sure that they're absolutely strong and vital heading into that school year, because they're going to be encountering all kinds of things from the other kids. We all know that.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is to realize that kids, as you were saying, their immune systems are learning. They are still immature. They rely on that innate immune mechanisms, maternal antibodies, all of these things, while their own adaptive responses and immunological memory are maturing, which honestly, they're really not even fully functional until about 7 or 8 years old, when we're talking about that adaptive, more of that mature immune system. And, this is really important, this learning period. And as parents, we have to realize that, our kids are going to get sick, and actually we want that inoculation. We want them, to be exposed to have this, obviously not in, major things. We want to protect them as much as possible, but really what we're wanting to do is to strengthen their immune system. So when they are exposed to a virus, to a pathogen of some sort, that, okay, they may get that, but their immune system is ready that they're not knocked down so hard, and so that they recover very quickly. That's really, what we want to do. It's not like we never want to get them, have them get sick or live in a bubble. That's just not practical.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when I was going to school, my mom actually ran the breakfast program. So I
Mhm.
would go to school with her like an hour earlier than all the other kids. And I would go into the actual lunchroom and my mom would make me my own breakfast there, then make the other one that the school told her to make for the rest of the kids. And it was a funny thing. So I was there actually eating like proper bacon and eggs and stuff like that. And then all the other kids were being given effectively what the government wanted them eating, and it was a whole lot less nutritious than what I was actually eating. So I think that's a big part of the problem, right? It's like when we're looking at the school system, it's like there's vending machines and there's pop machines, and the actual school cafeteria has pretty much processed food for the most part. I remember it was always like Pizza Friday, and growing kids need the calories, and they need that, and they need carbohydrates because they're running around all day as well. But I'll tell you, we could do a better job, I think, when it comes to the actual governmental systems that are governing these things. But you are in control of what you send them there with. And I think that that's the main theme, is like seizing control of what you can, sending them with the best case scenario, and just hoping that they don't partake while they're there and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it is a little off-putting to think and to know that a lot of school districts, public schools, have contracts with big food, these fast food chains to provide food for their children. And, we wonder why they're having some of the issues that they're having at such a young age. So you were very well cared for and had such a wonderful situation where your mom was able to make you homemade food type things for first thing in the morning. And of course, my gray hair gives me away. But way back then, it's like, oh yeah, we all sat down, had a good old breakfast, bacon, eggs, toast, fruit, and the whole bit. So we were all set and ready to go to school. So actually, speaking about school and ages and different aspects, I would like to have the poll brought up so we can see what our audience is working with. What are they? What do they deal with when it comes to school and kids? Thank you, Vanny. And okay, so our first question: what age group does your child or children belong to? And this is multiple choice, obviously, for those of you who have more than one kid at home and going to school. It looks like the majority of people have that early elementary, the younger ages, so 6 to 8 years old. And then our next runner-up is that tween, 9 to 11 years old, followed up by the early teens, young adolescents. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Teens, 15 to 17, then the young adolescents, early teens, and then the preschoolers. So it looks like we've got a pretty decent spread across. So we'll have to make sure that the comments that we make will address all of those levels.
Different set of problems for sure. When it comes to, as soon as that hormone dial gets really cranked up to 10, it's definitely a different set of problems emotionally, physically, that they're dealing with than kids are. So both equally important, but the bag of tricks is certainly going to be different for how you're going to deal with it with like smaller kids versus teens for sure.
Yeah, and definitely the workload, what is expected of them, the amount of homework, and then you start getting into sports events, bringing them to practice, going to games, how that works in with their homework, getting good sleep, which we're definitely going to be talking about. So yeah, definitely different issues, things that you have to think about for each of these particular age groups. So our second question is, how often does your household experience illness during the school year? And Uh, Over 40% said frequently, like 4+ times. So yeah, I mean, that can really throw it off, especially when you get this domino effect. One comes home sick, and then everybody in the family, within like, a few days to a week, and then it seems like the entire month, the whole house, is sick in stages. So definitely understand how that can work. Uh, and then it pretty much it tapers from there, the 2 to 3 times, and then rarely one time. And of course we've got like 11% saying constantly cycling something, which is, basically what I was alluding to with that domino effect. I love the fact of those people saying 0 to 1 times. Obviously you're doing something right, or even if they do get sick, they seem to be quite resilient. So our third question, what's your top concern during back to school season? And overwhelmingly, colds and flus. Your basic colds and flus. Then we have an even, and that was over 50% said that. Then we have an even 21% on school-related stress or anxiety. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, Justin. And we definitely want to make sure to touch on that, as well as exposure to environmental toxins. That's also something we are going to be talking about tonight. And then coming in last, chronic fatigue and immune burnout. It's unfortunate that kids at such a young age do happen to, have this. And it breaks our hearts as parents to see them going through such struggles. So, maybe them having a better immune system, getting better sleep, better diet, doing the things that we talk about tonight, that can help that mental health aspect as well.
Yeah.
Fourth question, which proactive steps do you currently take to boost your child's immunity? And here it was a select all that apply. So we've got our main, almost 75% of you, limiting processed foods and sugars. Hats off. That is absolutely fantastic. First of all, knowing how much those impact, and then taking the steps to make sure that that's limited. That's fantastic. The next runner-up was the supplements: vitamin C, D, zinc, probiotics. Fantastic. We have a very well-informed audience. Next up, healthy meals and hydration. Wonderful. You guys really are taking this well. 42% said air, water filtration, detox routines. Finally, routine exercise and outdoor play. I mean, I'm sure that all of you in some aspect, multiple things. And then 5% of you said none consistently. But maybe this could be something that could help you to, get it more into a regular habit. And we can offer some ideas on ways to do that. So our final question, how confident are you in your understanding of immune health and toxic exposure? We've got overwhelmingly almost 60% saying somewhat confident. Then we have almost an even split between not very confident and very confident. And some of you are here just saying you're just starting to learn. Well, we are glad you are here. And, we're always here to learn more. And like I said, we are going to have some great foundational actions to use in your household during the school season, as well as some odd things, some things you might not have thought of. So, hey, let's see how we can add that to your stack.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that kind of the school system, I think it's changed a lot as well from what it used to be. Like there's been the introduction of a lot more technology, for example. So like screen time is definitely the most it's ever been among young people. I mean, we know that. And unfortunately, the hijacking of the dopamine system there can really interrupt their energy levels and cause more irritability and issues and things. It's funny. So like I grew up in the 90s, right? And it's like, we went from the chalkboard. Like I remember being in grade 2, we had the actual chalkboard, and then it went from the chalkboard to the whiteboard, and then it went from the whiteboard to screens. And now it's fully iPads and
Yeah,
things like that
it's
are what's being used in schools, you know? So like, I think a really good area to kind of start would be like the mitigation of some of those issues, right? Like
mhm.
screen time, a lot of Wi-Fi exposure and things like there's, you know, the research can be a little bit murky there, but I do think that that's one of those elements that's disrupting kids and their immune system a little bit. And just something as simple as using a couple of little take with you devices to help deal with Wi-Fi can be useful, because if they've got the iPad right on their lap, the heat and everything coming off of it, I mean, it's interacting with their body, even their gut microbiome. So, like, I don't know what you do for this, Dr. Laura, but personally, I'm a fan of like Aries Tech, Lila Quantum, like some of these resonance devices that help their body to sort of pick up on healthy signals, and it counteracts the Wi-Fi without actually blocking it. And then just using simple like blue light filters. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to help mitigate that issue. Do you have any other kind of go-tos when it comes to like Wi-Fi mitigation?
Yeah, it is really difficult because the children nowadays, I know a lot of them, they're given the Chrome pads or, these laptops to do their work. And it's just constant. They constantly have a device in front of them. And I have seen, by the way, I was a teacher. Actually, I'm, certified teacher, taught in elementary school, middle school, high school, you name it. So I remember teaching on a chalkboard way back in the early 90s. But my grandchildren now, everything is done on these laptops and these smart boards, and just being inundated, that it's hard to take that away because it's expected, it's needed. That being said, whenever you can, to have them be off the device, off any devices, because I'm sure, as you know, a lot of kids nowadays have their own smartphones. And we're talking, as young as 6, 7 years old, when they're constantly exposed to that Wi-Fi, 5G, all of these electromagnetic frequencies, sometimes we just have to stop, put it aside. So like when you're eating dinner, have it be a no device at the table. Anytime that you can have it off the person, because distance is your friend when it comes to electromagnetic frequencies. Make use of that, and to be very, very structured into going, okay, you have homework. I understand you have to do this. You're going to be in front of the computer. You've got to do research or what have you. That's the time, and they need to get that done. And then put it aside, because their faces should not be in front of a computer having that blue light shortly before they go to bed, because that can disrupt their sleep, which they are so desperate of needing for their own repair, health, immune system growth, memory transfer, all of these things. So there are wonderful products, covers, sleeves that you can put in, but definitely just learning how to exist without it for a moment in time.
Yeah, well, even just for their eyeballs, right? I mean, just focusing on something so close, it's really like our ancestors didn't really focus on things that were that close to their face for that prolonged period of time, right? So that's, I think, what's causing a lot of the ocular issues. And then it's also the fact that the LED lights have this like imperceptible flicker behind it that you can't really notice, but it is there all the time. So one of the main strategies I use with people to kind of keep their eyeballs healthy is to make sure that once they're done their work for the day, and this applies to kids as well, that on purpose you take some time to focus on the horizon or something that's really far away and help your eyes to adjust there. Because I'll tell you, I see a pattern where kids are, more and more of them have to wear glasses, and more of them are having eye issues earlier on in life. And I think it has a lot to do with just having devices so close to their faces all the time. So, as something as simple as looking at the mountains for a while can actually help to readjust that whole kind of mechanism.
And, I was thinking as I was straightening my blue light blocker glasses, you can have them wear it. As you were just mentioning, so many kids now are wearing glasses. Well, the nice thing is the particular ones that I'm wearing are Viva Rays. You can actually get them prescription. So being in, fake lighting, really, in a classroom with the fluorescent lightings, which are already, sucking the energy out of the mitochondria. Actually, we dove deep in this. The CEO of and founder of Viva Rays, Rudy Nassif, and people can listen to the podcasts that I've done with him. He talks about his story as a student and how much the lights affected him and how it affected his behavior and his health. And that's why, one of the main reasons why he created these. And I have recommended them for my pediatric clients, for eye health, for the strain as well, because of the lighting, really can make a difference. So that's another hack.
Yeah, well, and it'll also make an impact on the sleep. And remember there was this movement a while ago to change the time of school, like to make it a little
Yes.
bit later in the day.
Mhm.
What a fantastic idea that was. I know that it didn't actually end up going through for anybody, but I think that especially with teenagers, like there's quite a bit of evidence that suggests that they should not be forced up early every day. And God, they're grumpy, and it's like, of course they're grumpy. They're lacking some of that recovery that their body needs. They're in such an anabolic place with their hormones that if we're disrupting that sleep cycle and making them wake up early every day, it's a big problem actually for their health as well as for their immune systems. So to me, that's one of the bigger areas that people should be focusing on, and is ensuring that their kid is getting like the best quality sleep, maybe even tracking it with an Aura ring, putting a few little protocols in place to make sure that their cortisol and melatonin rhythms are actually on point. But we find that a lot of people, especially teenagers, are really dysregulated there when they have to be at school by 8, which means they have to be up by this time to get to the bus, etc. 5 days a week. That's quite a bit of disruption. And I remember being a teenager and being like, God, like, really, I've got to get up and go do that again. Like, let's start at 9 and then I can have a little power nap here.
Right. And I will tell you that growing children, they need more sleep. And especially in teenagers when their hormones are changing, if they're tired and they're sleeping in, it's not necessarily that they're lazy. They're just tired. And the interesting thing that you were talking about with the research on the changes in school time, that a lot of the studies, and there was one back, like, I think it was in 2016, in the Seattle public school systems, they actually pushed the start times for the entire districts by 55 minutes, not quite an hour, but like an entire class time period. And the results were amazing. Even changing small changes, 30 to 60 minutes, allowing them that little extra time, that they found that they reported, the students reported less daytime sleepiness. And of course, trust me, as a teacher, you can see when your students are starting to fall asleep, that there was better mood improvement. There was less fights. There was less depression, less caffeine use, especially among the adolescents, the teenagers and things. One thing actually, it was really interesting because I had heard about this on a podcast, Dr. Peter Attia's podcast, and we're talking back in 2016, 2017 time period. An amazing thing that a result from this, there were less car accidents. Because when you think about teenagers, okay, a lot of them are driving to school. If they are overtired, or not getting enough sleep, and they're driving to school, that's one of the worst things to, drive while you're tired. It can cause a lot of accidents. But they noticed by shifting their start time by that hour, that was this beautiful serendipitous result. The car accidents actually had gone down, and they did verify as far as like ages and students that it's not it wasn't confounded by adults or no one related to the school. So amazing.
Yeah, and so I mean, I really recommend everybody watch some of the webinars we've done just on
Mhm.
sleep. 'Cause we've done a pretty sizable handful of them, and there's a lot of good tips in there about how to keep the circadian rhythms on point. And I think that that's one of the kind of low-hanging fruits when it comes to kids and teenagers as far as keeping their immune systems healthy. If you're sleep deprived, that's going to be one of the biggest needle movers as far as your capacity to get sick or not, right? And when you go to school and you're exposed to all manner of germs from all manner of other kids, and you're doing it in a sleep deprived state, the likelihood that you're going to get sick thereafter is just tremendously higher. So definitely prioritize that. Um, as far as like when they get sick, like, do you have any like protocols or things that you use to kind of help get the cold gone faster? Like with kids, it's a bit different than adults, obviously. But I mean, as far as like, is there any magical biohacks that like Dr. Laura uses to help just get rid of the cold a little bit quicker so that it's not on that cycle where, okay, now you got your sister sick and then they got the parents sick and the parents reinfected the original kid. And it's just this carousel that happens within the household. Do you have any tricks or anything that can help that kind of get out of there quicker? Or is it just a matter of like, all right, let's just let it run its course kind of a thing?
Well, no, actually, there are several things that can be done. First of all, making sure that they have the extra sleep, because the body is going to have to do the extra work to fight whatever the infection is. Depending on what the infection is. I mean, if you don't know, if you do know, what have you, silver. Silver is really great, colloidal, chelated, around in the mouth and the face to get, where the viruses generally will proliferate in that nasal pharyngeal area. So also maybe doing some gargling with mouthwashes to kind of cleanse and kill. Again, you want to kill any replicating viruses or pathogens. Vitamin C, the supplementation that they were talking about, vitamin C, vitamins or vitamin D, zinc, elderberry, having any of these things to actually, get on top of it to help support the body's immune system as antioxidants. Again, hot soup. That's chicken noodle soup, when you're talking about bone broths, having those warm, soothing, going back to what our grandmothers did. It's like they seem to know. Just so I really also the love, giving them hugs and support. And yeah, I know you don't want to get sick, but there are things that you can do too. But one of the worst things is to not want to touch them. It's like our bodies still need that caring touch. We want to release the oxytocin and, these other neurotransmitters that help with good feelings and healing. Plenty of hydration. Definitely good water, whether you use reverse osmosis, spring water, whatever, to make sure it's clean and doesn't have a lot of those toxins, maybe putting electrolytes in there. Excuse me, teas, depending on the ages, obviously, or whether or not they'll even drink it. Doing things like chamomile, ginger, any kind of herbals that can help settle that. Can you think of anything else off the top of your head that you
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like I've talked about this before, like coconut oil pulling, and I think that sometimes when you add in like oil of oregano, some of these kind of antimicrobial essential oils into that, it can really help without necessarily wiping out the mouth microbiome. So like when I get something, you get that itch in your throat and it starts to come about. I'll usually start to add like a plethora of these different essential oils into my normal routine, which is just doing coconut oil pulling. So there's different little ways that you can add that in a natural manner, and that's pretty helpful. You raised a good point about hydration, and it got me thinking about the water fountains that are at school. I remember when I went to school, there was like, 3 or 4 of them throughout the school, but every kid is going up, and kids aren't necessarily that careful about how they do stuff. And the water fountain is such that it's one you put your mouth right up to. I think sending your kid to school with their own sovereign water bottle is probably a really good call. I remember during the pandemic, remember there was like people would put tape over them, like nobody was allowed to use the water fountains. And among all of the ridiculousness that was, I think that may have actually been a good idea to not have people going to the same water fountain over and over again. But if you can send them to school with their own water bottle and then add some electrolytes in so that they're getting their own hydration in there, like Element has like a lot of fantastic flavors that kids would like. They just came out with a lemonade one, stuff that isn't a chore for the kids to actually do. But then you've subtracted one of the exposure sites, right? Like there's no way that there isn't germs all over those water fountains. So if you can like take control of that one little aspect, at least you've got the needle moving there with regard to exposure.
Right. Um, Something I wanted to mention to people, if you have any questions, specific, general, whatever, please put them in the Q&A because we will be answering your questions. I just don't see a lot of action there just yet. So maybe they are just so enthralled with all the information we're already giving.
Yeah.
But, throw any questions that you have in the Q&A. Another thing that I thought of, excuse me, Epsom salt baths. I mean, obviously supervised, age appropriate, but it's wonderful when they're a body ache, tension, just not feeling so good. Obviously, if they have a fever or anything, you don't want to have it too hot, but even just a lukewarm bath with some Epsom salts can be very relaxing. Cool cloths, of course, the old go-to for sore throats, coughs, saltwater gargles, things like that. Trying to think of anything else.
Are you a fan of like doing the Epsom salts that have like eucalyptus and stuff like that added in there for kind of opening up the airways? I've used them before, and it's a weird sensation because you're in a hot bath, but then your skin is cold because of the eucalyptus.
Right. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because what I like to do, I don't necessarily like the Epsom salts that already have it in it. I prefer to get the plain Epsom salts and add my own essential oils. So if you have, excuse me, your own essential oils, the eucalyptus, fantastic, you can just, drip it right in there. So again, just be careful about how much, because you can do too much and then it just can be, assault on the senses. But yeah, no, I definitely like the essential oils. Also considering using a diffuser, having it in the room, using eucalyptus and there are others, chamomile and other blends that can be used to help with as a decongestant, as clearing of the air, as different things. So yeah, people can definitely do the research on that.
Yeah, and I think also like nebulizers are pretty interesting tools for that as well. Assuming, of course, that it is respiratory that we're talking about. You can use the typical saline solutions to really help clear gunk out, but then to get a little more hacky with it, there's actually ways that you can nebulize like exosomes, glutathione. You can get a little bit creative with nebulizing as well, and I've seen some pretty good results with a lot of people. I think you'd have to be careful with kids if you are going to be using glutathione as far as dosages and things like that. But I think anything that accelerates that clearance, right, of the gunk and stuff from the respiratory tract is useful. Even like cordyceps mushrooms, right? Like, again, smaller doses, but I mean, these things help to circulate oxygen throughout the body. You can use chaga, reishi. I mean, mushrooms have a lot of impact on the immune system. And if you have respiratory shit going on, I think that using cordyceps is one of the more powerful ingredients because if you're unfamiliar, it was actually discovered by like high altitude herders. And they noticed that when their cattle would eat this one type of mushroom, they had like more energy. And when they actually studied it and they checked out what was going on there, they recognized that it was increasing the lung's ability to actually assimilate and utilize O2, which is very interesting that it only grows at high altitudes. Like, it's funny how nature does those kinds of things. But as an extract, I mean, you could use it in their morning smoothie or whatever. It comes in powder or capsule forms, and it will actually boost the immune system as well as lung capacity. So I'm a pretty big fan, as long as there's no allergies or anything, for using some of these medicinal mushrooms. I don't know about you, Dr. Laura, but I use them on pretty much a daily basis. I know you like lion's mane and some different ones.
Oh yeah, chaga, reishi. Yeah, I have tinctures that I use that actually is made from a local grower here in Vermont. So I love buying local, and right at the farmer's market, and stuff is great. I love it. So yep, I use it. You know what I'd like to do? Seeing that we are a DNA company, to dive into some of the genes of of our children, which, by the way, getting your children's DNA reports, really good idea, because it can give you some great insight into their detoxification pathways, into their mood and behavior profile, into all of these aspects, their diet and nutrition, on how you can best support your children in their growth, in their learning, to support their detoxification pathways. So let's talk about some of the genes that are related to immune system for kids, and what you would look at and how you would go to supporting that for children.
Sure, and it's funny because on the original the poll that we did, it talked about supplementation, and two of the things that it mentioned there were vitamin C and zinc. It also mentioned vitamin D, and all three of these things we have a genetic pathway for. So it can kind of act as an indicator as to whether or not your kid requires that little bit more of a bump than somebody else's kid might, because if you have optimal genes there, it means that perhaps just dietary sources are going to cover you for everything except for vitamin D, because it's more of a hormetic pathway than it is a nutritional pathway. But to clarify what I'm saying, there's a gene called SLC23A1, and that gene is associated with vitamin C uptake, utilization. And then there's SLC30A8, and that's more along the lines of the zinc pathway. So if you've got those, they should be in your nutrition report. And if they're suboptimal there, then that's likely one of those things that your kid may be low on and need a little bit of a boost in. And then we have a whole pathway for the vitamin D, because it's more of a hormone. It kind of gets synthesized and created in the body, as opposed to something that we would just eat, right? I mean, there is a little bit in shiitake mushrooms, and there's a couple dietary sources, but unless you're eating massive amounts of sheep's wool, you're not getting a whole lot of actual vitamin D via the dietary pathway. So just in brief, we have three different genes that we look at. The first gene basically converts inactive D2 into the activated D3. Once it's activated, the second gene takes over and delivers the now active D3 to the receptor. And then, believe it or not, the vitamin D receptor site is also a genetically encoded thing. So you could be optimal for one and not for the other two. You could be suboptimal across the board. And those are the ones that are going to need that little boost of D3, especially in the wintertime, of course, depending on where you live. But I'll tell you, vitamin D, as far as an immune system modulator, one of the most powerful things out there. I mean, it helps with inflammation, gut health. There's over 10,000 things in the body that vitamin D does. And like I say, we should really call it hormone D, not vitamin D. That's how powerful it is.
Good point. And the nice thing is that the D3 supplementation you can give to infants. They have, certain formulas in the amounts. Just make sure that if you are doing that for your child, make sure it is appropriately dosed, for the age range. But yes, it is generally safe. Obviously, for pediatrics, verify with their pediatrician, because also you want if they have any blood tests, their annual checkups, have them check their vitamin D levels. That can really make a difference. So yeah, absolutely. And, even considering the fact for the vitamin D, hormone D, they're going into a period where they're going to be inside a lot. I mean, yeah, they can have recess, but it's not for very long. It's not like they're getting a lot of natural sunlight during the day. It's going into winter time, unless you live in, Southern Hemisphere. But really, their exposure to the sun, their ability to make and to have that vitamin D is going to be compromised. So all the more that this is the time period that you'd want to make sure that their vitamin D is supported. So good, very good points.
Yeah, well, and there's some really interesting genes as well within the mood and behavior that's actually good to know about your kid as well. Like, we talk about brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's a really important metric when it comes to how the brain really grows, right? Neuroplasticity. And when you go to school, I mean, that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to build the knowledge base and the skill set within your kids. An interesting thing, and I remember Kashif used to talk about this a lot about contact sports versus not contact sports, right? Because we also call this the concussion gene. So if you have suboptimal BDNF and you want to be a football player or something like that, it's a little bit more of a red flag, because the more knocks you take on the head when you don't have that support of the brain derived neurotrophic factor to help your brain heal, that may be something that you want to intervene upon with some lion's mane or just something to help encourage brain-derived neurotrophic factor. But it's an interesting little thing to kind of look at genetically as well. Like, look at their anxiety genes and dopamine genes. All of these things are going to really manifest in their personalities. And I'll tell you, so many kids have like anxiety issues surrounding school. And we look at the ADRA2B gene to really see how likely it is that they're going to struggle with that, and even post-traumatic stress. If they've got deletions in there, just know that they're probably going to be a little bit more socially anxious, because their body doesn't process the noradrenaline as well as somebody else's might. And so when there's fights at school and there's, you go and there's pressure and you have to be there, a lot of kids suffer with anxiety. And if you see a D allele in that profile, it means that, yeah, that kid is going to be a lot more likely there, and they're going to need some support, maybe some tech, right? Like, I love my Apollo Neuro. I talk about it all the time. I won't do a webinar without one, because I'll probably start talking too fast. Like, it keeps me kind of grounded and calm. And I'm double deleted for ADRA2B, so it makes a lot of sense there. But it's like, even just understanding their executive function can help you guide them through the scholastic experience as well.
Yeah. And, I love the fact of you diving in and touching on that mental health aspect, because that was, a concern, for some of our audience members. And it's really something to lean in on, to know how your child is wired genetically so you can better support them. And there are other things that really, no matter what your profile is, certain ways, certain techniques on teaching the children how to handle stress, how to calm their nervous system, how to be able to reset using, say, certain tapping techniques, breath work, because don't have to be standing around, tapping yourself looking kind of strange, but just taking a moment, taking a deep breath, learning how to calm the breath, how to activate vagal tone, that parasympathetic nervous system when they do start feeling anxious. These are all techniques and things that they're skills. So if you yourself out there, our audience members, are wonderful parents, if you are unfamiliar with these, please go out, start learning about some of this. Actually, a great book, Breath by James Nestor. Wonderful, teaching about different breathing techniques, the benefits of that, how it can even improve sleep, breathing through the nose, helping to calm the nervous system. There's another one, Always Breathe Correctly. And it's a children's book teaching them how to breathe. So definitely recommend those because breath work is absolutely amazing. I mean, you figure we all have to breathe. we take tens of thousands of breaths every day. You should do it the right way.
Yeah, well, and it does impact your nervous system if you're one of these people that's always anxious, like the whole HPA axis and the connection there to the nervous system. I think that if you're someone who's very up all the time and there's so much going on when you're at school, I remember that feeling walking through the hallway, not knowing what was going to happen. It's one of those things that's a little bit nerve-wracking, and if you're in that fight or flight mode as a young person, it is going to increase your cortisol, and you may start down regulating things like secretory IgA, which protects your gut, right? A lot of these immune system modulators can get kind of blunted when you have really high cortisol. So I think that gaining control of the breath is fantastic. While you were talking, another thing occurred to me because I was like putting myself back in school. And I remember, for guys anyways, people spraying Axe body spray all over the place all the time. And I think that's another little key thing is like, using natural cleaning products like for your body, natural, like Dr. Squatch is what I like to use now as far as like a body soap. It's like coconut oil and oatmeal and sea salt, and it's got all these fantastic ingredients, clay and all these things. I think that it's important to remember that the skin is in fact a detox organ. It's an immune organ. And if we're putting them like if we're putting chemicals all over our kids, it's going to have an impact on their little immune systems. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the innate immune system in these kids is likely pretty good, but they haven't yet developed that adaptive immune system yet. So we don't want to deplete their initial vital reserves so that they don't have any further immune response when real sicknesses come around. So the more of these little areas that you can gain control of and make it so that their body is not fighting that uphill battle, ultimately they're going to get sick a little bit less. So it's like simple swaps, right? Finding a natural deodorant instead of the chemical laden one, not plugging all of the lymph system there underneath of the armpits with aluminum and these kinds of things. Those are the little decisions daily that can actually lead to a healthier immune system. So once again, folks, take control of the things you do have control over as a caregiver.
Absolutely. And breathing is free. By the way, the book I was talking about, it's called Always Breathe Correctly by Patrick McKeown, and that's McKeown. It's an excellent children's book. So I actually bought it for my grandchild. So another thing is that I want to mention about breath is it is tied to the immune system. I mean, just look at Wim Hof. Just amazing. The Iceman, just through breath work, movement, how the studies that were done challenging his system, actually intravenously injecting pathogens, and he didn't get sick.
He's such a maniac. That's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. So
what do you think about sauna for kids? Like, I think that it's probably you wouldn't do as big of a time slot as maybe for an adult, but like, do you think it's a good strategy for helping kids detox?
It can be, but again, age appropriate. Because the thermal regulation and the extremes of the temperatures, obviously, needing to be aware. It would also be something that if you're not sure, speak with your pediatrician. But yeah, it certainly can be, especially for, the older children, older students. And it's, like the teenagers, especially if they're in sports, working out, the soreness and just doing that, after a hard workout, maybe, shower, or, doing the sauna, a nice cool shower, they are working into that adulthood. Those things that do benefit us can benefit them, but obviously, structured appropriately for their needs and for their age group.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like another weird thing here is like there's really a pattern of when I'm talking about teenagers right now being
Mhm.
put on all manner of medications as well, like different psych meds and things. And I've told the story on here about myself being put on antibiotics for a super long period of time, like basically all through puberty, and simply because I had acne. I mean, it was like went to the doctor, he put me on antibiotics and just kept me on them, till basically age 18 when I was already done puberty. That's when I came off them, but it was a very, very damaging thing. And I wanted to mention, I mean, we do have our PGX reports, and I think that it may be a useful thing to do with
Yeah.
young people before they get put on anything. Because the thing about the PGX report, if you're not familiar, it's pharmacogenomics. It basically provides you a big long list of medications and all of these different classes, and the genes are encoding the enzymes that are actually metabolizing these different medications. So by understanding the speeds of some of these different enzymes, you can know what drug, like what therapeutic drug would actually have the least likelihood of horrific side effects. And it puts it into a pretty easy to navigate list. It's like red, yellow, green. Green is like normal likelihood, but then yellow needs more info, and red is like, okay, this one is likely going to be pretty toxic for you. So I think that the value too is that won't change, right? Like once you know the genes, you know the enzymes. When you know the enzymes, you know what's going to metabolize at an appropriate rate. So again, doing genes can really give you a lot of little indicators as to how to set the kid up for success if they ever do need to be put on like a psych med or something like that because they're struggling. At least you know which one is going to metabolize properly for them.
Yeah, that's great advice. So let's let's dive into a little bit more of maybe what um, a day could look like. You know, like how can we stack some of these things? Like what can we do as far as like morning routines and getting into the types of foods that work best to fuel their brains and bodies? What do they do when in school, or like right after school, or getting ready for dinner, and their bedtime routines? Let's walk through some of those things and techniques that can be employed.
Definitely. There's a saying that I stole from somewhere, but it says, show me your habits and I'll read you your future. Right. And it's like, I think that it's a really good one because it's like, yeah, if you show me what your day consists of, I can pretty accurately predict where you're going to end up heading. So with kids, because their whole future is ahead of them, the more positive habits that you can instill in them, basic stuff in the morning, right? Like basic positive affirmations, basic hydration strategies, and a good nutritious breakfast, those kinds of things really stack up. I always talk about stacking wins. That's what I mean, right? Little positive tasks. If you can get your kid to stack W's all morning long before they go to school, it's pretty likely that they're going to have less behaviors and less grumpiness and less brain fog. And they're not going to have that crash in the afternoon where they're at school and they want to have a nap and the teacher's telling them they can't have a nap. So for me, I mean, it would be basics, right? Like when they get up, normal hygiene strategies, right? You got to instill that in them, right away. Get the hygiene, get the hydration, get the high quality breakfast, and send them on that bus nourished, hydrated, feeling good, good about themselves. That's how I would start the morning. I mean, maybe even a couple of little biohacks. If you can say, you know what, we're going to take advantage of your dopamine system right now, and we're going to get you to earn your little bit of screen time today. Right. And you're going to do that by hitting your breath work or reading a chapter in this positive book or whatever it is. Um, I don't think that you can bombard them with structure. I think that you need to kind of ease them into it a little bit. They're going to resist. But if you can implement a couple of little biohacks, like I'll tell you, when I'm getting Missy ready for her program, I get her, she likes to do her makeup in the morning. You know what I mean? So it's like, I point the red light at her while she's doing that. And it's like, this is her doing what she wants to do, but we've added a little biohack just to improve her circulation and stuff. She's special needs, so we want to make sure that we're getting her a few positive stimuli in before she goes out for her day. I'll put the Apollo Neuro on her to help with her energy levels a little bit, and simple little just biohacking tech and things like that. It just turns it into a positive morning, and you send them away floating. I don't know. What do you think for the rest of that? I mean, definitely the morning is very important. That's how you set up a winning day.
Exactly. And I love what you are talking about and what you do. You're such a great dad. Another thing that I've had clients, pediatric clients use the PEMF mats, like a higher dose, the ones that go on the chair, that they can sit on that while they're having breakfast, or, when they come home and they're doing homework. So really implementing, again, what you said, things they're already doing, but kind of sliding in and stacking some of those biohacking techniques. So I just think that's fabulous. Go ahead. It looks like you've got an idea.
Yeah, I do have an idea, because also, because you're the caregiver and you're the one responsible for what they're eating. I was just on a call right before this webinar with people, like they're raising someone with autism, and it's quite difficult, and they bought a program, and I was so excited because I'm like, I know exactly what it's like to be a caregiver for special needs child. So I was giving them all this advice, and one of the things I said, because he's a really picky eater, their little guy, is I said, you have the opportunity to mix as many little superfoods into like a smoothie or something as possible, right? So it's like you can add any number of, antioxidants or minerals, colostrum, like whatever your go-to is there. But my whole recommendation is that every time that your kid eats, it's an opportunity for you to fill them with superfoods, right? Because food is such a huge spectrum. It's like, poison all the way to medicine. And especially when you're dealing with like people who have special needs, it's like, I find it's pretty common that they get fed Fruit Loops and bullcrap all day long, and then everyone's wondering why they have so many behaviors that day. And it's like, that's a missed opportunity there. They have to eat. It's your responsibility to feed them. So why not use each and every feeding as an opportunity to fill them with very nourishing ingredients? This is where the mushroom complexes might come in, or maybe it's some spirulina, or maybe it's just breaking a couple of little probiotics or some organ capsules or something into their breakfast in a way that they're not going to notice it. Right. But it's just like taking advantage, and just while they're not looking, you put a couple of little supplements or something in there. It's a great way to help fuel their brain and their hormones and their cells, their mitochondria, without disrupting their day. They don't really want to get up and do all this biohacking, right? But you can take advantage of the fact that you're the one in control and you can actually fill their bodies with all kinds of useful ingredients. So like, I think that that's a really good strategy. Like, make them a smoothie or something and just fill it to the nines with everything you can that's positive for them.
Yeah. And even having them be a part of it, obviously, depending on their interactiveness or how much control that they may want, that you can have a few fruits or, like a thing, and say, okay, which ones do you want to add? And allow them to choose, but limit the choices of which they can pick from. But that helps to empower them to know, hey, I'm playing a part in what I'm taking in and what I'm doing. And I want to circle back a little bit from what you had said about not bombarding them with all of these choices and things that they have to do, the structure all at once. And what I mean by this is starting a week or two before school starts, start working in that structure, talking to them, again, age appropriate, and level of understanding appropriate, but setting up those habits. These are what the expectations are going to be. So that way there's no surprises. Oh, but why? Why do I have to do this? No, we've talked about this. This is set up. This is why we're doing this. And this is what's going to be done. And, having those reinforcements, building in reasons for them, to want to participate and to be proactive. in what they're doing. I think that's very important for them to start realizing and taking agency, especially as they're getting older, and realizing why structure is so important.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point as well because, like, as you anticipate the school year starting, usually during the summer, kids do sleep in, and like I remember that it was like, 9, 10, and then you get up as opposed to 6. But it's like I don't think that it does them any good, especially when you all of a sudden have to get, okay, now it's bus time, right? And they're now used to sleeping until 9 because all summer long they did that. So it's like you're right, leading up to it, those couple weeks before September, start to just gradually introduce these things because unfortunately that's what the system is right now. But it's a lot less of a downside if you can at least get a little adjustment. Like you mentioned Viva Rays, our friends at Viva Rays, and it's like there's a different kind of spectrum to the glasses that they use, right? Some of them are more just fully blue light blocking. I've seen a lot of really good data about like blue light enhancing for the morning, like actually concentrating the blue light to make it so that it adjusts that circadian rhythm a little bit. Blue light is not evil, right? It's like, I don't want to make that misconception. The different spectrums of light do different things. When we say blue light blocking, it's really an evening thing. And LEDs and stuff can be damaging to your eyes. So it's just a different thing. But blue light is actually wonderful for lots of stuff. Blue light can clean your teeth, it can prevent acne breakouts, and it can absolutely kick off that circadian rhythm. There's uses for blue light. And there is glasses that you can use to help to actually concentrate the blue light to get the cortisol and to get the serotonin and the things that are going to wake you up and adjust that. So the more of that circadian rhythm hacking you can do, the easier time your kid is going to have at school. And you might as well start mid-August so that way it's not such a shock to their little bodies.
Yeah. And the fact that they shouldn't be wearing any type of frequency blocking glasses when they're outside in normal sunlight. They
Yeah.
need the full spectrum. They really should have that. So, that's something, obviously, if they need glasses to see, well, then, they'll need their glasses, but just making sure that there isn't any, again, blue light blocking or frequency blocking when they are out in the natural sunlight, because that's part of regulating their circadian rhythm. And speaking of circadian rhythm, the clock gene, which is in our mood and behavior reports, again, something important to understand or to know what your child has. Are they dysregulated? Do they have a genetic predisposition to having some issues with their circadian rhythm cycles? Because the circadian rhythm, the clock gene, is in every single cell and affects every single tissue and organ of the body. So, know how your child is structured and can work with them instead of trying to put them in a box, and then getting, ticked off because they're not, following suit and doing exactly what you want, but they still need structure.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really like the regulation of some of these rhythms. Like if you have a suboptimal clock gene like I do, it's a lot harder for your body to really just get onto a rhythm and stay there. Like the body tends to be a little bit more erratic. And sometimes you'll wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes you won't, sometimes you'll wake up at 4, sometimes you'll wake up at 7. And it's just that overall rhythm is always a little bit harder to dial in. So one of the main strategies I use to help kind of pull that into alignment is why I talk about the alignment process, right? It's very important, is to not only go outside in the AM, right, and get that sun in your eyes, get that blue yellow spectrum in the eyes, do it again in the evening, right? Like PM horizon gazing is fantastic because then it tells your brain, oh, okay, now it's nighttime. And if you do both of those things without any glasses on, right, just seeing the actual sky, that helps to kind of keep that rhythm on point. And it's one of my main strategies. I get up at the same time every day. Sometimes it's harder than others, but one of the first things I do is I wander out onto my deck and I look towards the horizon. Don't look at the sun, but have them look right near the horizon because it's at a low solar angle, and your brain will recognize what time of day it is based on the angle of the sun as well as the light spectrum. Then do it again in the evening because that's a regulator of this whole rhythm. If you can regulate that, even, going to the bathroom, so many different things will start to happen at the same time. And it makes it way easier to adhere to a schedule.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, we talked about sleep and how important sleep is. Well, a good night's sleep starts in the morning, and it's how that is structured. And having that good sleep hygiene, the 4 pillars of sleep, QQRT: quantity, quality, regularity, and timing. So again, it comes back to the structure. And this should be for the whole family, because your kids look at you, you are the living example. They'll pay attention to what you do, not necessarily what you say. But having that regularity, that specific timing for them, and adhering to that even on the weekends, on vacations, that's going to make a difference. And that's going to help build the resiliency and the strength of their immune system. So, it really, one begets the other. Not to mention that it is during that time that good sleep, of the deep sleep, of REM, this is the time that their short-term memory, the things that they've learned in school, are now being processed and shifted into their long-term memory. And obviously, we want to make sure that that happens. Not to mention the lymphatic system. We want to have those little brains washed and cleaned, and any toxins or buildup, that is cleared. So it is that time during their deep sleep that they get that. So, very important that all of these little things, the rhythm, having that structured routine of good habits can really make a difference.
Absolutely. I think that also, like, if they have the personality for it, but trying to get them involved in the sports, like whatever the school actually offers is really important, because it's like, the thing is, I remember there being a lot of kids who, even on recess or lunch, would choose to stay inside. Right. And it's like, having a reason to go outside midday when you have the opportunity, I think is very valuable for them. I wasn't like that. I remember it driving me nuts. It'd be a beautiful day outside, but then the teacher wants to turn the projector on. So they close all the blinds and stuff. And you're just like, like, this is torturous. But, I think that sports, I mean, there's a pretty big connection there with self esteem, with coordination. It can even help with brain derived neurotrophic factor, like we were talking about. I think having them be active, especially because the thing is, sitting in a chair is also in and of itself pretty damaging, right? Like hip flexors tightening up. I mean, it's not normal to be crumpled over in a desk all day. And it can lead to issues later on in life. Like I've talked about hip flexors quite a bit on these webinars, because I think when your hip flexors tighten up, it actually interferes with hormonal communication between your upper and lower body. It can mess with micronutrient delivery. I mean, anything that messes with blood flow can definitely impact all the things that the bloodstream does. And it's a delivery mechanism for oxygen and nutrients and different things. So if your kid sits all day at school and then sits all day at home, once they get home, we've got quite an issue developing there. And that's even independent of having crappy food. So get them moving, right? Like mindful practices, like moving, playing sports, tossing around the football or whatever it is with their friends, or whatever girls do. But, just getting them involved, getting them moving, I think that's a really big factor for overall health, longevity, mental health as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, kids have a lot of energy to burn.
Yeah.
And I remember, because I'm the youngest of 4, it's like we would start getting antsy and everything. And my mom would be like, get outside, just go run outside. So it's like we just need to, get rid of that energy. And not to mention, not only will they kind of keep them calm when they are inside and trying to sit and eat and not being little antsy pantsy, but it'll help them sleep better too. Expending some of that energy. Something before we jump into question and answers, I wanted to touch on, because we talked about this before we started the webinars, and that's some environmental toxins, invisible threats. Now, I know we talked about EMFs, but I wanted to mention some things where you might not think, but where you can lessen that toxic load. So you had mentioned synthetic fragrances, all, the body X stuff, but hand sanitizers, overuse thereof, that was a huge thing during the pandemic. Markers, these, markers on whiteboards and stuff, those volatile organic compounds, that strong smell, that is a toxic exposure. BPA, plastics, these containers that oftentimes we'll send kids to school with. Granted, not like you necessarily want to send them with glass all the time because it can break, but be mindful of all the plastic and the Ziploc bags and everything that you put the food in, because that just increases their microplastic exposure. Anything else that you can think of?
I definitely just the actual choices, right? Because like the vending machines are very tempting and they're right there. And that's the thing is like the options that they actually have to snack at school, right, are full of toxins. You have a vending machine that's for pop, and you have another one that's for corn chips and all these kinds of things. And so like I think sending them with like really good snacks, right? Like Lineage makes those beef sticks that are like grass-fed beef, like actual pepperoni sticks, and that's a great thing. Trail mix, something that's going to give their little brains a little bit more fats and less carbohydrates, perhaps, is useful. I'm a big fan of like just dried fruit and those kinds of things. I mean, if you can send them to school with those options, then that's really going to fuel them throughout the day, and it's going to reduce their toxic exposure as well. So I think that that's a pretty good starting point. But you're right. I mean, they don't have good air filtration in the school necessarily. There's all the hand sanitizer thing during the pandemic, especially. I mean, it was like every time you turn around, someone was shoving one of those bottles at you. Sanitize your hands, sanitize your hands. And it's like, I was saying this right before the webinar. If anything says the word kills in really big letters on the bottle, you probably don't want to slather it all over your skin, because that's exactly what it's doing, right? Kids' microbiomes need to be healthy. That's why we have the instinct to play in the mud, right? Like we want to be, touching the soil, and we want to be making sure that people like to interact with animals and all kinds of stuff. All of that is for the microbiome, and it can help increase it. But the second you start putting actual poisonous substances all over your hands and then touching yourself and your face and stuff, I'm saying, it's really quite damaging. So I think that the more of that you can kind of mitigate, the better. And school is not necessarily set up for the success and the health of our kids, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, it's a sad thing, and the realization of all of these places and things that are exposing us to toxins. It can get a little overwhelming, but you can start at home and start with the education of where it's coming from. So let's jump over to questions in our Q&A. So our first question from Susan, she says, what gene variants most impact good or suboptimal immunity? I'm going to kick that over to you, Justin.
Yeah, so there's definitely a few of them. I mean, the what I would suggest is that more of these genes are going to have some sort of effect on the immune system than not, right? Because like we have a whole hormone pathway. Well, that can have implications there with toxic estrogen byproducts and things like that. We've got a whole diet section, which like, for example, lactose tolerance and gluten sensitivities. I mean, all of these things can impact the immune systems. Your methylation pathway is really important there, right? If you're over or under methylating, you may be turning on or silencing genes that are associated with immunity. So getting that right is really important. I think the more zoomed in and specific ones there would be what we already talked about with regard to vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc. The next one I would likely go towards would be the glutathione pathway. I think that the way your body glutathionizes toxins changes them into something water soluble from something fat soluble, and gets your body to actually excrete them and get rid of them with that phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 detox. I think that's really important. And we look at 3 pretty specific ones. One's associated with the liver, one's associated with the gut, and then one's associated with the respiratory tract, right? So we have one called GSTP1, and it's really associated with what you breathe in and how your body detoxifies it prior to it actually getting into circulation. So if you're suboptimal for GSTP1 and you're surrounded by people that are sick, it's possible that you're going to be that much more likely to have a toxic event take place there. But I think all of your glutathione genes are really important. So there's GSTT1, there's GSTM1, and then there's GSTP1, all of which have pretty significant implication for the immune system. I think SOD2 and the mitochondrial detox pathway is going to be pretty relevant there as well. We know that mitochondria, definitely, if they get gummed up with toxins, that's going to really weaken your body's adaptive reserve to fight against pathogens and these kinds of things. I'll tell you, the gut 360 that we do is pretty important there as well. Your gut is a huge mover in your immune system. And if you have dysbiosis, if you have opportunistic bacteria that's kicking your body out of homeostasis, that's going to be a really big mover there as well. So that's not genetic, but knowing what's going on in your gut can have a lot of implication for the immune system, because that's where it is. Like 70-80% of your immune system is in that gut.
And so true, and very important, to be eating the foods that support it, to be treating your gut right. So our next question, also from Susan, she says, can you recommend other techniques in addition to breath work that can activate the parasympathetic nervous system when an acute stressful situation in which the sympathetic nervous system has been acutely activated? So I have a few things, and then I would love to hear, what you have in mind. So a couple things now. There is something that can be done. It actually can be done anytime, very discreetly. Humming, chanting, that actually activates the vagus nerve. If there's any high anxiety, panic, of course, it kind of depends on the location, but ice packs, cold face dunk, it actually triggers this dive reflex. It's instantly calming. Another thing is a self-touch, like grounding the body with tactile input. And that's something, that can be done. Grounding, it directs sensory focus, helps to interrupt that stress loop. Doing things like, this would be more like after an acute activation, but stretching, yoga, it releases that physical tension, helps to reset the system. And then, or if there's any calming music, again, depending on where this happens, or if you have something to play the music, that can help to direct that focus. It soothes the limbic system. And really practicing, a few of these techniques really helps to train the brain to recall that relaxation, that helps make it easier to move into a more relaxed state from that acute, a stressed state. Are there any other techniques that you could offer?
Yeah, I also mess around with this acupuncture mat thing, which is kind of a cool concept, because it's like, I actually am of the opinion that Eastern medicine is underrated, where we are. Like, I think that it tends to get the rap of being a little bit woo woo or hokey or whatever. I'm telling you, there is a lot of great wisdom in those traditions. And acupuncture, I think, is pretty well documented as far as how well it can impact the body. But with regard to this mat, it's like it's a mat that you lay on and it's covered in all these little spines. And what happens is when you lay on it, it actually kicks the sympathetic nervous system on first, right? Because your body senses the prick, and I shouldn't say senses the prick. That sounded odd, but it senses the needles, let's just say.
Right.
And so it kicks on the sympathetic nervous system, because your body goes, oh my God, like we're being stabbed, right? And then after a little bit, like a few minutes of that, your body starts to kind of ease in to the spines, and your body will start to say, okay, we're actually pretty safe. And so the nervous system goes up and then it goes down. And before you know it, you're able to kind of like exhale into those spikes and you're in a more parasympathetic state right there. So it's one of the strategies I use before bed for kind of turning off the fight or flight mechanism. And it's a really low tech. I mean, you don't have to plug it in or anything like that. You just lay on it. And it's a great place to do that breath work, right? Because if we're going to do like some prolonged exhales or some box breath or something like that, it's going to just couple with the feeling of being on the acupuncture mat and really help a lot with that. So parasympathetic activation in the PM especially is really important. But one thing I have to say too about it is that it's not just about parasympathetic activation, right? Like what we want is a rhythm. There's time to be sympathetic. I think people also get a little bit too focused on doing as many parasympathetic things as they possibly can. You can get into a place where your body doesn't have enough of a cortisol response anymore. Like it doesn't muster enough of that response. If you've been under a lot of stress for a long time, you can get into a place where now you're barely making the grade when it comes to cortisol. And that's actually a more dangerous place to be in a lot of the times than high cortisol, right? So it's like for me, I try to activate sympathetic activity in the AM, and I on purpose, I'll get up early, I'll go do my horizon gazing, and then I go right into the gym and I hit the weights because I actually want to double up on the sympathetic nervous system to get the proper diurnal rhythm going on there, right? Be sympathetic, have your cortisol in the morning, and everything in the evening is then parasympathetic, and it keeps your diurnal system kind of on point and regulated there. So don't be afraid of cortisol and don't be afraid of the sympathetic nervous system. This is a balancing act that you need both parts of. You can be too parasympathetic, so just kind of pay homage to what the natural rhythms are.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a question in the chat that I wanted to make sure to address. Marianne is saying, can you suggest a good multi-supplement for 9 to 12-year-olds? Now, when we're talking about 9 to 12-year-olds, now, what you really want to look for is quality, high quality, looking at multivitamins, some things you want to avoid. If you see folic acid in it, don't use it. It's synthetic. It's going to disrupt their methylation pathway. You want to look for something, maybe even organic, or, look for reputable brands. Okay. So, I mean, I don't have any particular affiliation with any brands, but generally, if you're at a big box store and it's really cheap, it's probably not a really good brand. But you want to make sure that it covers the essential vitamins, things that we have spoken about. And knowing their DNA is really helpful because you know which forms of, say, B9 or B12 that they need. If they are needing a little bit more of vitamin A, E, D, zinc, whatever the case may be. So definitely look at that. As far as things you want to check, see if there's any certification, testing, independent testing on it. You definitely want to avoid any sugar-laden gummies. Opt for chewable tablets or liquids when possible, especially if they don't take pills very well. There are, powder formulations, or you could even open up the capsule and put it in smoothie, like Justin was talking about earlier. Also look for non-GMO, allergen-free, that it doesn't have soy, dairy, gluten formulations, things like that. So is there anything that you can think of that we might be missing when it comes to looking at supplements for kids?
I think you pretty much nailed it. I mean, there's definitely better and worse brands out there. Typically, I'm not a big fan of getting supplements off of Amazon if you can avoid it too, because it's like, oh, what was the temperature of the warehouse, and did the guy drop it 6 times? And like, there's so much between you and that ingredient before it actually gets to you. Like, such a big process. Also, some of these companies that make like 50 million different ingredients, usually there's going to be some cross-contamination and things like that happen in there. So just once again, the reputable companies are the ones to go with. I mean, I know that there's a brand called Hiya, like HIYA, that's really good and touted to be a whole food based multivitamin for kids.
Right.
So maybe check out ones like that, ones that have a good reputation and are in a proper facility, those kind of things. But then also starting the dose pretty small and titrating up to the full dose is what I recommend. But beyond that, it's getting the most from their diet as humanly possible, I think, is a really good place to start.
Well, our last question I don't want to ignore. So very quickly, Mary Ann asks, what about the toxins from vaccines? Now, that is, can be opening up a whole Pandora's box in and of itself. But again, I didn't want to ignore it because, yeah, this is a concern. This is the time period that, kids, they're getting a lot of the vaccines. So really for this, when we're talking about toxins or compounds that incite the immune system, things like formaldehyde, thimerosal, aluminum salt, stabilizers, all of these different types of things that can actually cause, well, that's kind of the point, is to incite the immune system to recognize the particles, the pieces, depending on if it's a part of a virus or, if it's an attenuated or whatever, for it to notice it as foreign and to then fight it. So really, I would recognize, look at their DNA, see where do they need support for their detoxification, know the information, know what the possible side effects are, be informed when it comes to, any of these vaccines. That's the biggest thing. Make sure you're making an informed decision. Don't feel pressured, but don't also just, blow it all off and say, no, I, don't want any of it. Not saying that either, just saying, inform yourself, be educated to make that decision. Speak with your doctors, do your own research. And then support yourself. So if, say, you're detoxing after a vaccine or preparing the child to have one, making sure they're doing the things that we've talked about, strengthen their immune system to be able to handle and recover, but also making sure that they, don't have over-exacerbated symptoms for it. So any last comments?
I think I'll leave that one to you. That was good. I don't want to have to call my lawyer or anything here. So, but thanks everybody for showing up. I mean, I hope you learned something. This is a bit of a different topic than we normally tackle. So hopefully you guys got a little bit of value out of it. Keep those kiddos safe, keep them healthy, and keep yourselves healthy while you're doing it. Parenting is a very difficult task. So pat on the back to everyone who's trying their best and doing it well.
Yes. Enjoy, everyone. Stay safe, be healthy, and have fun. Love each other. Take care.
Bye-bye.